Welcome back to another episode of Mentorate TV, where we follow the credo, we are not here to be, but to become. So it is of great pleasure that again on the show I have Alexander Graf von Schlieffen joining us from Berlin on Zoom. And today's episode, we're going to focus on the man behind the art, the man behind the author, and definitely the man behind the astrologer. Alexander, thank you so much for being with us and spending some time and some of your wisdom with me personally and, of course, with our community on Mentorate TV.
It's an honor for me to be part of it. Thank you very much for having me here.
Well, looking at your CV, I mean, first of all, it's like a book. It reads like a book. It's absolutely fabulous also with all the exhibitions you've done. I wonder, how did you find your way to not calling yourself an artist, but actually studying art at university?
And originally, I wanted to become a musician. And I still play music. I play a lot of music. I play jazz guitar and I play every day. And I have a trio and I have a duo. And sometimes I give concerts and local things in Berlin. And I always drew. I played music and I made drawings. And I had a teacher in my high school who was completely convinced of my talent. And he was a mentor. I was very lucky. At that time, he was already in his mid-70s. And he was a wonderful man. And we started to develop a friendship. I saw him every week. He taught me techniques like etching, drawing, watercolors. We drew each other. I sat in front of him. So I somehow had a very good training before I went to university already. But a traditional training, but I wanted that. I always loved the old masters. And when you look at my old paintings from the 90s, 1989, 1990, 1991, and blah, blah, they are a bit reminiscent of Italian Renaissance painting. You know, I always loved old painting, but my work was always about being in the present, of course. It was not about waking up the past, but it was about a bridge of something old and something temporary. And so this man, he was so supportive. It was a mixture of a friend, a mentor, and a father figure, but I was also very important for him because the generation gap between us, and sometimes he was asking me things about life and stuff. And it was also very philosophical, you know. And so he's the reason why I started. And then I went to the art academy and I started painting in 3 different spots, in Vienna, Frankfurt, and Düsseldorf. And what I did in the past was never au courant at that time. It's like with my astrology. Mm. So people said, like, why do you paint this way? And it's like, do you come out of the Middle Ages? What was up with your mindset? You know, I always did exhibitions. I was at the art fairs and I always sold my work. But it was hard to connect my work to something like a network that was going on. It's only happening recently, in the past few years, that people all of a sudden, they especially like what I did 30 years. I mean, they like what I do now, the mushroom paintings and stuff. But they like the stuff that I did 30 years ago. Unfortunately, I don't have any of that stuff anymore. But it's funny for me that in the past, I always felt, yes, I know this is what I do. But now people, they're really freaking out also because they see I've been doing this already all my life. It's not something I didn't jump on a train now like some people do and paint figurative, but they didn't do it before. I've been doing nothing else. You know, I didn't do photography, I didn't do video, I didn't do abstract painting, whatever. I was always into that kind of thing.
So you started it really as a skill, like really from the how do you draw, you know, a figure, a portrait, realism, and then with that you developed the artist you are right now, which is for a lot of people, it is unique. The way you paint your paintings. Also, I think the acrylic, the material itself is quite a strange one. It looks great when you see it, but then when you try to photograph it, it's kind of like tries to escape and has a life of its own, which anyway one seems to experience. But coming back to that moment where the teacher all of a sudden became just so much more than your teacher that teaches you with Wasserfarben or with an aquarelle, but became a person that you had a place for in your heart, and so much so that you would actually make it like a life cycle to study, to be. Yeah. So what was it? What triggered it? Was it just that you had somebody supporting something that you were good at, and that was sufficient? Or was there a real shift where you discovered a part of yourself apart from the skill?
I don't think it's another brilliant question. I don't think I could separate skill and personality. Okay. I think that a skill and a personality and what you want to do, what you wish to do, are so connected. But since in the past 38 years, real talent and skill was not so appreciated. It was more about a mental strategy. Even as an artist, if you had thoughts or concepts, that was the key to success, but not a talent. But for me, when I paint or when I play music, it's something that comes out of myself, but it's the way I express. You see how I talk with my hands, because I always work with my hands. It comes out of my hands, literally. So it's like, and the way I see things has a lot to do. When you draw something that you see, your vision of it changes completely. When you just look at it, take a picture, this is one thing. But when you draw it, you all of a sudden, you enter into an understanding what you have in front of your eyes, even if it's something very simple like a still life. So what I wanted to see, what I was looking for, and the way I approached it with a pencil or whatever is connected. So like my inner vision of things and my skills are dancing. They dance around the ability to approach the thing and to deepen the knowledge. Excuse me.
Sorry, you have?
I've been painting all my life, drawing, and I play the guitar, but simple. I have not doing other things. So it's like, and now at my age, I've been doing it for so many years. It's the same with astrology, that you get to a point in the relationship to the theme, painting, music, astrology. There's a depth and a complexity that is so beautiful. And you don't get there if you don't do it for so long. And this is something that I really love. That's why I'm not bored.
Yeah, I was going to say, what I think is exactly that line, or seems to me as a lay woman, be the underlying current with all three, is there is a complexity of real skill and science underlying whatever that comes out in terms of art or in terms of message or composition. If you think about the basics of music itself, be it the notes, be it the lower key, the upper key, and whatever, and then the symphony or the creation. The same thing with art. You have to know how to draw, a simple line, or what is perspective. And with astrology, you need to be able to read signs. There is just mathematical constellations which will have a certain impact on energies. So it's always kind of like an underlying current there, out of which you then create something amazing that pleases other people or communicates important messages.
Yes, and I feel, I do this. I can take the thing and show you quickly a painting, if that makes sense, just like a little thing here.
Yeah. It's not so little. I don't know whether I would get it on my wall. Okay.
And so it's very difficult to see that. They are very big, 2 by 3 meters. Yeah. And it's a cycle of paintings. Of course, a cycle. As an astrologer, I have to work in cycles. And it consists up until now out of 7 paintings in the size of 2 by 3 meters. And it's called the unknown matrix, the cycle. And I do these kind of psychedelic mushroom landscapes, and when I start to do that, I know where I'm going to go. So as I paint these huge things, and the size has something to do with the physical size of the body, because you have a small painting, you perceive it with your mind. And when a painting is bigger than the physical body, you go there with your whole body. And that's the reason for size in my case. And then it's like exploring the world that I discover as I paint. So I don't paint what I'm doing. So I feel like being a scientist at the same time as I paint, because I discover worlds that just come out of the painting, more or less. It's like I'm more like the midwife of the mushrooms rather than the one who creates them, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
And
I was just about to say, you're just bringing reality out of, let's call it matrix, into onto canvas for us to perceive, because the mushrooms with all of its characters exists.
yes, absolutely.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
Amazing.
And it's also physical process, because I painted with a brush and sometimes with my hands, and then I feel, as you know, as if there would be big animals that touch the paintings, to tickle the whatever, because I feel kind of communication. And then I also discover that as I do it, that there is a world that is so complex out there, and only painting, you know. But it's a bit similar with astrology. You know, you don't do astrology, you don't reach a certain level of knowledge, and that's it. You keep going and going and going. It never stops. The other day, I had the idea, if there will be a point where I leave this planet, and if my experience and my insight to somebody who's at the beginning of the astrological career, and then they can add what the outcome would be. Unfortunately, it doesn't work, because you need experience as well. If you can continue to explore for generations and generations and generations, I'm so rich and so juicy and so complex. This is what complexity is the thing that I'm looking for. I'm not looking for a complication. That doesn't interest me, but complexity is beautiful.
Complexity, absolutely. And I wonder, when you opened the argument with your parents, becoming very personal now, Alexander, and you said, I want to go and become an artist. And anybody speaking German, and maybe not only, you are from what we would call in German blue blood, the Blaublut. So you are a Graf. I don't know how that translates properly into English. How did you react? Count. Yes, so you're Count von Schlieffen. And I wonder, was there a stigma attached to having a son that becomes an artist?
Of course, because first of all, there's no such thing as an artistic talent anywhere in my family. So I'm like a mutation.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no one who can even draw a straight line, you know. It's been military people, lawyers, judges, but no one even playing an instrument just as a hobby, you know. I paint, I play music, I write books, I do anything else. I would be the worst lawyer in the world, because I'm far too crazy for that, you know. So my father, he was working in the economy, and he couldn't quite relate to that. But my mother died very early, and I had a stepmother, and she was artistic. And she said, he has to do that. So she supported me on my way to the art academy. Beautiful. And then my father, he was wonderful, because he came to all my exhibitions. And then at some point, he saw that I could earn a living from that. And that was rare for him to accept it.
Back to economy. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's fine. Because, you know, that was his perspective. Yes. I never felt any, you know, I never felt like, oh, he doesn't understand my music, he doesn't understand my painting. That was not a problem, you know. It was so beautiful. He contributed his respect from his perspective, and it was a loving way of how he appreciated that, you know.
It's wonderful as a son to actually know that from an intellectual perspective, a life choice, your dad might not have supported you. You were lucky to have, in that sense, a stepmother that said, hey, the boy needs to do what he needs to do or what he
Yeah.
needs to do. And then showing the appreciation in his own way. And for you to understand that he did not discard you just because you turned out perhaps a bit different than what he had envisaged. Now, I
Yeah.
wonder then the second step, Alexander.
Yeah.
Artist is crazy enough perhaps for for your background and the traditional family, but then going into astrology. Now, how does one go from art to astrology? What was the trigger? Was there again a certain mentor? Was there an eye-opener and an aha moment?
It was again an incredible, wonderful man, to be honest. And both men, they had white hair and white school, well as the other man. The other man was something I unfortunately in real life. I had a neighbor, she was an artist too, and she had in her studio and she was making some coffee and I was waiting in front of a book. She was into it. And as you can imagine, 99% of the books look the way I imagined an astrology should look. So awful, kitschy, esoteric, fluffy, you know, like you say, like with an aesthetic sense, no way. And I was not interested into astrology at all. I was interested in, of course, in art, in philosophy, a lot into philosophy. I was interested in occultism. I was interested in mysticism. But I thought, because I didn't know anything about astrology is like esoteric crap, you know, for people, uncultivated people. So there was only one book that didn't look like that. And I was just there waiting for the coffee. So I pulled out this book that had a beautiful cover. I opened it and I started to read and I said, wow, what the hell is this? And it was a wonderful language. It was a brilliant mind. He was so sharp, this guy. Mm-hmm. Thomas Ring is his name. And the book was called Genius and Demon, which is, again, a topic that is very appealing. And I read one page and I felt like, if a guy like this is writing about something I thought is crap, it can't be crap. Mm. And then I took the book, I still have it, of course, and I bought all his books, and then I wanted to meet him because I felt this is such a wonderful person. But he was dead already, and so I visited his wife, and then I visited his best friend who was 92 already at that time. I had traveled all through Germany to visit that man, to ask him stories about the life of this guy that I admired so much. And then I started to pick up studies, and I studied astrology for 3 years in a school which is kind of, it's not a statal thing. It's like a Berufsverband. It's called like, you have this for
Professional Association for Astrologers, maybe.
Yes, thank you. It's like it's an association, but I still have to confess that in the astrological communities there are a lot of people, or a lot of attitudes, or that I can't associate with. This guy is like, Thomas is the top minimum level. You know, there's hardly anything on his level. There are some great astrologers, of course, but there are very, very few really, really great astrologers, I have to say. I'm sorry, but so you see, my approach was playful, like a child, all of a sudden, who discovers a new toy. And this is interesting because this approach is, until now, the reason why I do astrology is my excitement and my pleasure. Many people come into something like astrology because they are looking for a solution for a problem in their life, and they don't find it in the so-called regular world, so they look for something outside of the box, and then they find an astrologer, and then they study it for themselves. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's more problem-oriented. I'm not problem-oriented at all. I want to inspire. When I do astrology, I want to inspire people, and I want to create pleasure via inspiration. And if I can help someone, I hope that I can help via inspiration, but not helping. So you see, and that's my approach to astrology.
Now,
And that was the turning point. It's great because it was another man with a white beard.
with another beard, yeah, and I have to say, just to share it also with you, and you know it anyway. You did my horoscope, and we read through it, and in many ways it was quite flabbergasting, and in many ways it really just supported something that I kind of felt inside of me. However, couldn't really put it neither into words and certainly not into action. And you were certainly a person vital to, have me crack more into what the stars seem to see, that I'm a very good mentor, that I'm a very good facilitator, communicator, and that really kind of resulted for now in the creation of Mentored TV. So belatedly, you heard it a million times, thank you very much for that. But this is how concrete it can actually become if somebody is open to the science of astrology, that it can really just indicate what may be happening, should be happening, or if something is confusing you on an emotional or energetic level, that there is something. And for somebody like you to interpret it, put it into potential actions, professions, or whatever it is as a tool to be used, that is real value. And that really makes a difference to people.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
Yeah. So yeah, big kudos here. That was one of my questions which you answered. I wanted to know what really makes you wake up, get up with excitement in the morning. And of course, with the art, with the paintings, with astrology itself, then you are a devout father. Let me ask you, the relationship between you and your family, especially your son, how much is that very different to your own relationship? And are you, apart from a father, also a conscious mentor and guide for your son? Are you trying to be that, or is it not something that you would say you would do?
My son changed my life completely. I dedicated my first book to him. And there's also dedication in the book. And he changed my life completely. I never wanted to have a family. I never wanted to be a father. None of this. But one day, how do you say this in English? The Klapperstorch.
La cicogna. I know it in Italian, but when it's exactly.
And La cicogna came by.
Yes.
And she just dropped the egg.
The stork. Sorry, isn't it the stork? The stork.
Stork. Yeah, but it's the one that does clack, clack, clack.
Yes,
yeah, exactly. And by the way, we have a lot of storks around Berlin. They are everywhere here, so we have to be careful. Anyway, one day it just dropped the egg. And it dropped the egg at a time where I didn't have any idea about this. And I was asked at 4 o'clock in the morning if I would agree to that or not. And spontaneously, out of my intuitive impulse, I said, yes, we're going to make it. Mm. And then I was fortunate to witness the birth of my son. And that was the most striking moment I had ever experienced before and after. The most beautiful moment. The most magic moment. And my son was with me for the first hour because it was a fast birth and his mother fell asleep. So beautiful. He was on my arm for the first, and it was the most delightful. And I felt like it's such an honor that life gives you this little creature and asks you to be in service of that creature. This is how I felt my role as a father is. So I never had a concept of what it means to be a father. I never had a concept of what I want him to be. Fortunately, this young guy is probably in every respect completely different from the way I am. Some people say that we look a bit alike now. I don't see that. I can't see that. Mm-hmm. And he made it so easy for me to enjoy he's 20 now, to enjoy these 20 years. It was 20 years of pleasure. And it was for me, I also did everything in the beginning when he was a baby. I did Pampers, everything, and it was great. And I carried him on my breast, always on my body. And I felt like, oh, how sad for the men who don't experience that. Some men think it's not male, and you can, it's such a great experience. It's to be there right away from the very beginning, to have this incredible, profound connection. And it was for me like I re-explore the world with him through his eyes.
Yes.
And he always had a very strong, and still has a very strong willpower. So I never had to encourage him for anything. I just had to be there and support him. Mm. And it was a delightful bliss. And it still is. It's the most striking experience, and it asked me to add something to my life.
Yeah. Sorry, please finish.
Yeah, because I raised, most of the time I raised him on my own, because we didn't live together then, and it forced me to change my life completely. To restructure my life, to be there all the time, but due to the fact that I'm freelance and I don't work in an office and I have to be there from 2, and I do live here in a flat that is studio and living place at the same time. And so I could allow and afford to spend a lot of time with him. And, then he always had his boyfriends, also when he was very young. And they would play and I would paint, and it was fun. It was never
a disturbance.
No.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say, but
yeah. I think it's so interesting what you said instinctively is I was there all of a sudden to serve. And how I experienced motherhood, again, not planning, again, given by whatever powers took over the moment and have me conceive Victoria, was an instinctive, I'm there for her, and it empowered me. And for myself, I don't know whether you felt it like that. If I see now how I looked at life before and what was a problem before, I just thought, oh my God, what a sissy. After having had a child, and really then knowing that you are a mother, that you are at service, that you're responsible to create some responsible partaking individual in the society, everything changes. Be it in risk assessment, be it in what inspires you, what doesn't, what bothers you, what doesn't anymore. How did it shift your assessment of your life situation? Also, in the way you experienced your artwork, your actual expressions, or in the music, or anything that you create, considering you are a creator?
I can only affirm what you say. All of a sudden, other things become very important, and they are important every day. And it's great to be responsible. I just felt like how fantastic to be responsible and it makes you change something inside your physical nature as well, because you are, I became a protector, and there was no question about that. And it's like a second personality coming out of oneself, being in that particular role. And I'm grateful because it was like a counterpoint to the other things, but it never interfered. It was an inspiration. It was never interfering with my own stuff, with my own stuff in terms of painting and astrology. It's the opposite. It was a source of, and still is, source of inspiration,
Yeah.
And the thing is, the other day, he's 20 now, he came up to me and said, listen, I listened for the first time to one of your podcasts, because I don't impose my work on him. I don't say, look what your great daddy does. It's, he has other things in life that he's interested in. And he said, for the first time, I listened to your podcast at night, and I couldn't sleep because I had so many thoughts. And then Beautiful. He said, and all of a sudden I understood why you paint mushrooms, because you talk about cycles, and astrological cycles are cycles in time, and mushrooms are cycles in space. And I said, Mamma mia, what an insight. And it was so beautiful.
Yeah. Yes, it's very interesting when all of a sudden your children start, evaluating what you do, and not only evaluating in the sense like whatever, but they generate their own thoughts. Now, you said something fundamental, and I want to just, in conclusion, also, in terms of what you've learned, circle back to it. And you said that you and your son, you're very different, as you and your own father were very different.
Yes.
Considering what you do and how you experience yourself, did you ever feel that you were just very different to the status quo, perhaps also to the zeitgeist, to the other people in your school, in your class? And how did you, if so, how did you deal with it as a child, as an adolescent? Was it tough at times? Was it okay? Did you care?
So it was sometimes very tough because it was especially tough, in the time between, let's say, 30 and 48. Because when you do something and you earn your living and you feed a family from what you do, and you do something where everybody says you're crazy doing what you do, this is tough. And it's also painful. But then the pain is, I didn't choose these things out of any strategy. I do what I do because I can't do anything else. It's like an impulse to do that. And for me, also my music, and I have a taste in classical music that's a bit particular, And I always felt like, how can people not, at least sometimes, follow and feel where I see the beauty? It's about beauty. So I felt like I have a sense of beauty that most people don't understand. Mm. But it was like, I can't help myself changing my taste towards mainstream in order to please, because this is where my heart goes. And it has a lot to do with beauty and aesthetics in terms of painting and music. And astrology is also a way of seeing things. There's also a certain aesthetic in astrology. So this is changing now, as I said, in the past 2 years. It's changing completely, and it's the first time in my life that I feel what I do is something where the people can relate to, and they like it, and they are pleased with it, they are inspired, And it's also with the music. I've been into jazz music all my life, and that was never something that people really liked. There was one jazz club in a big city, and there was one concert per month, and that was it. Berlin is like New York in the 60s since few years. This has become the center for jazz in Europe. There are several jazz concerts every day. There are jam sessions every day. There are so many young people living that music. This is like, what's going on for me, Like, I love this music all my life, and all of a sudden it's there. The singer of my trio, she could be my daughter in terms of age. This is the generation. And that's quite striking and exciting for me.
Well, if you, in conclusion, if you would say, first of all, just very quickly, do you do your own charts, and do you let them guide you?
I do look. The thing is, the reason why I do astrology is not self-optimization. It's pleasure and excitement. Okay. So I didn't choose to do astrology to help myself or to make my life better. I just, I also don't play music to help myself. I play music because I love it. So I'm not focused on my own chart for that reason. And then I do, I always do reading to other people, so I'm busy with that. And then I'm busy for my podcast and for other podcasts and stuff. But when it's about a significant decision, of course, I look at the constellations. Yes, I do.
And in conclusion, Alexander, if you had to leave 3 aspects of what you thought were your main learnings in your life so far, what would you say? What would you whisper in your son's ear, for example, as in the 3 main things, items of guidance?
The first thing I would say to my son, and he knows already, it's the most beautiful thing to be a father. And that's something we learn from that. That's more than just, it's like something you learn from it every day. And the second thing is, no matter where you come from, you can always meet somebody in the street, and they do things in a way that you have never seen it before.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And you like it, and you can take it on board and make it become part of your life no matter where you come from. This is something I always say to young people, especially the ones who need that because they have their parents and they are afraid that they would become the same. And I say, forget it. You have a choice. When you see something and it inspires you and it resonates to a part of your soul that has not been touched before, that's there, maybe family couldn't reach that point, it's your accessibility, your openness that will allow you to take this on board. And I think this is a very important moment.
And the third one? Do you have another one? If this is only, if it is 2 learnings, then I think that is that's amazing already. If you have another one?
In terms of learning, you know, nowadays, I'm 55. I learn more than ever in my life.
Okay.
Because I don't learn. I don't study. I don't read books. I do. And as I do my work, I learn. And that's great. Learning by doing in a very simple way. So I feel that with every painting I do, with every chart I do, I learn so much. You know, sometimes when I do a chart reading, and my so-called client, I don't really like this word, but says something that inspires me, I take a note directly. You know, I write it down. So I learn day by day through what I do. Not because I repeat what I do, because it's always about an exploration.
In evolution, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So also something I'm trying to, not so much like an acclaimed type. I'm more like a monkey. Someone and the way they do it, and then I look at how they do it. I try to repeat it. You know.
Yes, absolutely. So, yeah, but that's the point. You know, I think it's not the strongest that survive, but it's those that look around, that listen around, and see. You know, how can I evolve? What? It doesn't matter what level, what education, what religious background. They might be value in the person, what they do, or how they see things, and perhaps it's worth my time, my thought, my consciousness to listen and perhaps integrate, and with that you just become a better person in myself. And I think it's very, very amazing, this kind of life journey you had, Alexander. And you know, looking back consciously, so much value you can pass on, and you did pass on also in only these 40 minutes that we spent together on Mentorate TV. Just very quickly for our community, where can they find you, find out more about you, find your art, and also if astrology is of interest to them, where do they find it?
If you Google my name, you will find my websites, and this is where you can see what I do, what I offer. I also have an Instagram account and Facebook. I'm not very good at these things, but I do it. So this is where you can also reach me in case you want to be in contact because of paintings or readings or whatever.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Alexander Graf von Schlieffen here on Mentorate TV, a very personal, candid conversation with some interesting turning points I think we all did learn from. Alexander, thank you very much.
It was a great honor for me. Thank you.